I refused to pay for my entitled sister's wedding after our parents couldn't afford it. My entire family turned against me until my sister unexpectedly showed up at my door. I said no to paying for my spoiled little sister's big wedding when my folks couldn't cover it themselves. After that, my whole family pretty much ganged up on me, but then Catherine showed up at my place out of the blue. My name's John, I'm 34 years old, and I work as a software developer. I pull in a good paycheck, way more than anyone else in my family. My mom used to teach music before she retired, and my dad's got this little hardware store he runs in town. Then there's my sister, Catherine, who's 30. I haven't talked to her in about 5 years now, mostly because she's a real pain to deal with, always acting like the world owes her something. She's been that way since we were kids, and my parents never did a darn thing to set her straight. I put up with her nonsense for years, but everything changed 5 Christmases back when she dragged her new boyfriend over to my place for dinner. I just moved into this new apartment, and I was excited to host something nice for once. But leave it to Catherine, she wrecked the whole night by running her mouth about how my place was too small, too outdated, and in a lousy part of town. Meanwhile, she wouldn't shut up about her boyfriend, some rich guy who lived in this huge mansion that made my apartment look like a broom closet. I'd had enough, so I laid it out for her plain and simple. I told her I paid for this place with my own money, no help from mom and dad, which is more than she or her fancy boyfriend could say. Then I said if she thought my home wasn't good enough for her, she could show herself the door and not bother coming back. Well, she and her boyfriend got all huffy because they knew I was right, and they stormed out. That was it. We haven't spoken since, and even though my parents kept pushing me to patch things up, I was done with her. The only reason I'd ever kept her in my life was to keep the peace with mom and dad, but after that night, I couldn't take it anymore. Fast forward 5 years, and I hear through the grapevine that Catherine's getting hitched to that same boyfriend from back then. The wedding's coming up in just a couple months. My parents, being the stubborn folks they are, promised to foot the bill for the venue and decorations because they didn't want his rich parents showing them up. I thought that was a dumb move from the start. They ought to have known Catherine's got a taste for the fancy stuff, and there's no way they could afford it. Plus, trying to compete with her fiancé's family? That's a losing battle. They've got way more cash than we ever will. I don't know what got into their heads, but they locked themselves into it, and the big day was closing in fast. Naturally, with all the extravagant plans Catherine had in mind, my parents figured out pretty quick they were in over their heads. They couldn't pay for it all, so a few days ago, they showed up at my door asking me for a loan. Now, me and them had been getting along fine lately, but I had to turn them down flat because of some stuff that went down years ago. That's why I'm sitting here wondering if I made the right call. Lots of my relatives are saying I'm just being stubborn, but I don't see it that way. Way back when I was finishing high school and gearing up for college, my folks sat me down and told me they weren't going to help with tuition or any of my expenses. They said since I was 18, I had to fend for myself. That threw me for a loop because they'd always had my back before, but they explained it was how they grew up on their own after 18 because their parents didn't have much to give. They said it made them tough and self-reliant, and they wanted the same for me. They hadn't saved a dime for me or Catherine. Their plan was for us to work our way through school like they did. Problem was, my college program wasn't a walk in the park, and I didn't want to juggle a job on top of it. I wasn't sure I could keep my grades up. College isn't cheap either, and no amount of part-time work was going to cut it. So, I floated the idea of taking out a student loan, but they shot that down quick. I even suggested borrowing some cash from family and paying it back later, but they acted like I'd insulted them. They said borrowing money went against everything they believed in, that it was pitiful to rely on anyone else. We argued about it a ton, but in the end, I got my grandparents to help me get a loan, and that's how I made it through school. I was furious with my parents back then, and though I eventually let it go, I never forgot how they handled it. Catherine didn't have to deal with any of that. She never bothered with college. She figured she'd either take over Dad's store someday or just marry someone, and now here she is, doing exactly that. Good for her, I guess. The thing is, I still remember how they preached about never borrowing money when I needed help for school. They made it clear it wasn't right, but now that Catherine's planning this huge wedding, they're singing a different tune. It rubbed me the wrong way. They made my life harder back then, and I don't think her wedding matters more than my education. If I hadn't finished college and done well, I wouldn't have this job or the money they're asking for now. So when they came to me for help, I brought up everything they'd said about loans and principles, all that stuff they drilled into me. They didn't know what to say. Guess they didn't think I'd hold on to it after all these years, but I did, clear as day. After I said my piece, they just went home without a word. I figured that was the end of it, but then my aunts, uncles, and cousins started blowing up my phone, saying I'd embarrassed my parents and hurt their feelings real bad. Mom and Dad had been telling everyone I turned into some big shot who lords his money over them, acting like they hadn't done anything for me. That's not how I see it. I was just standing up for what's fair. I stopped talking to them after that. If they had a problem, they should have said it to my face instead of crying to the family behind my back. I didn't bother with the relatives either. If they couldn't get where I was coming from, I had nothing to say. I wasn't even invited to Catherine's wedding, so I didn't see why I should chip in anyway. For a couple days, I didn't hear from anyone in the family, and I was fine with that. I don't think I did anything wrong. But then, 2 days ago, my parents showed up again, madder than ever. They claimed I got them kicked off the wedding guest list. I didn't have a clue how that could be true since I haven't talked to Catherine in forever, but they said when they told her they couldn't pay for everything and asked her and her in-laws to help out, she flipped out. She pushed them to find the money somehow, saying it'd look awful if she had to go to her fiancé's folks for cash this late in the game. She's got a point. If Mom and Dad weren't sure they could handle it, they shouldn't have promised anything. She's always been a brat, but I can't say she was wrong to be upset. I think her and her rich boyfriend should have paid for it themselves, but if my parents said they'd do it, they ought to follow through. I told them that straight up and said this mess wasn't my fault. I didn't tell them to bite off more than they could chew. They only had themselves to blame. Booting them from the wedding might have been a bit much on Catherine's part, but what did they expect? She's always been like this, and they raised her that way, not me. They wouldn't listen, though. They kept saying if I'd just given them the money and not held on to old grudges, none of this would have happened. I thought that was a cheap shot, so I told them to hit the road. They left, but now the whole family's against me, calling me selfish and cold. I don't buy it. I think I'm in the right, but I still said no to helping with Catherine's wedding since my folks can't swing it. Update 1. Well, I've made up my mind. I'm done with my whole family, and I'm not talking to any of them anymore. It's wild how both my dad's folks and my mom's folks have all teamed up against me right now. The only ones who've got my back are my grandparents. My mom's parents passed away a while back, but my dad's parents are still around and sticking by me. They've been trying to keep things calm in the family, but I can tell they're getting worn out from all this mess. Everyone else used to have their own little spats, but now they've all bonded over not liking me. I guess I can feel good about bringing them together, even if it's for a dumb reason. I've gone ahead and blocked every single one of them because I'm sick of the drama. Someone online said maybe they're all against me because they're jealous, and I reckon that makes sense. I don't like bragging, but I'm doing a heck of a lot better than most of my relatives, and it seems like they can't handle that. Growing up, they all told me to play it safe, get a business degree, take over my dad's hardware store. That's the smart path. They thought I was wasting my time messing with computers, but look at me now. That's how I pay my bills, and I'm doing way better than my cousins. Not only do they envy me, but their parents act like I'm some kind of problem too. It doesn't add up to me. Family's supposed to cheer you on when you make it, not get bitter about it. That's never been how it works with us, and it bums me out sometimes, but I can't change how people are. I'd bet my folks are loving this, seeing everyone turn on me. They're still saying I'm the reason they got cut from Catherine's wedding. We haven't talked since they swung by last time, blaming me for messing up their bond with her, which I still don't get. My grandparents told me they're not speaking to them either, since they're on my side. It just shows how ungrateful my parents are. My grandparents have bailed them out plenty of times over the years, and they act like it never happened. That's part of why I'm glad I didn't give them any money when they asked. They'd have conveniently forgotten that too. They take everything for granted, and it's high time someone showed them that's not okay, even if it's someone as rotten as Catherine. Update 2. Hey, something pretty hilarious went down yesterday. I was tied up with work all day, so I couldn't tell you about it sooner, but Catherine showed up at my house after I got home. She rolled in about an hour after I did, and I couldn't believe it. I've told you before, we haven't spoken in 5 years, and we've never gotten along. I figured she was there to talk about her wedding, especially since our parents aren't invited anymore, and I was sure she'd hit me up for cash. She didn't lead with that, though she's too smart for that. Instead, she started off saying she wanted to say sorry for all the junk she's pulled over the years. She said she's turning over a new leaf, getting married soon, and wanted to personally ask me to come to the wedding before anyone else, to make things right for how she's acted. She admitted she regrets being such a jerk, but said it wasn't all her fault since our parents never called her out on it. She grew up thinking her attitude was fine, but now that she's older, she sees she was awful and wants to fix things with everyone she's ticked off, starting with me, since I'm her brother and had to deal with her the most. I let her say her piece, and when she was done, I told her I appreciated it and was glad she'd finally wised up and apologized. But I knew she wasn't finished, so I just waited. Sure enough, she went on to say she heard from our relatives how rough our parents have been on me, calling me selfish, cold, and petty just for not pitching in for her wedding. She tried to butter me up, saying I was totally right to stand my ground, since they never helped me out after I turned 18, and they're the ones who promised to pay for her wedding, so it's not my job to rescue them, especially since me and her don't even get along. I could tell she was building up to something, so I kept quiet and let her keep going. After a bit, she finally spilled it. Since our parents aren't coming, they pulled all the money they'd promised her, and she started complaining about how unfair it was. They'd told her they'd cover some costs, and now she's too ashamed to tell her fiancé that after her blowout with them, his folks would have to pay for everything. That's why she came to me asking if I'd help her out just this once, promising she'd owe me forever. She even said she'd sign papers to prove she'd pay me back, maybe by year's end, just to save her from the embarrassment of admitting this to her fiancé. I thought it was interesting she'd go that far with a contract, but I told her I needed time to mull it over. Even with her apology, we're still not close, and things are tense between us. I figured she'd get that, but nope, she had the nerve to say I was acting too high and mighty, and it wasn't a big ask from my own sister. That cracked me up, considering we've had zero relationship for 5 years. I knew right off she was just there for money, not sorry at all, and I told her she's just like our parents, only caring about herself. She got mad, started hollering at me, but I'm not mom and dad, I wasn't putting up with it. I told her to get out of my house, I wasn't dealing with that garbage. She wouldn't budge at first, so I took her by the arm and made her leave. She threatened to call the police, saying I attacked her, but I didn't care. She finally took off, and I was steamed for a bit, but now it's just a funny story to me, I'm not letting it ruin my day. Update 3, so, it's been a couple weeks since I last checked in. I thought me and Catherine still being at odds meant she'd take back her invite to the wedding, but today I got a real surprise, a wedding invitation showed up for me. It threw me off, and I wasn't sure what to make of it, so I reached out to her. She didn't answer at first, but a few hours later, she called me back. She was short with me when I thanked her for the invite, and I asked her straight up what was going on because I was stumped. She said she'd been serious when she apologized that day and is really trying to turn herself around. She'd figured out the money on her own, so she didn't need anyone's help anymore, but she wanted me to know she wasn't faking it to cozy up to me because I've got cash. She meant every word she said. She also told me our parents helped her see how bad she used to be, and she's working hard not to end up like them. I asked if she was planning to invite them too, and she said they'd been lying to folks, she never told them not to come. She'd just been furious with them for putting her in a bind. She'd told them from the start her wedding plans were big and pricey, and she didn't think they could handle it, but they swore they could. So when they bragged about it, it'd be humiliating for her to admit to her in-laws that her folks couldn't back it up. What bugged her most was how they didn't even think it through and were dead set on outdoing her fiancé's family. When she chewed them out, they decided on their own she didn't want them there and uninvited themselves. She never said or hinted at that. It's the same game they played with me. Instead of talking it out with her, they ran their mouths to everyone else. It's messed up how they trash us to people but won't face us when they could fix it. After bad-mouthing us, they act shocked when we don't want to hash it out, then pin that on us too. They love playing the victim, and I'm glad Catherine's finally catching on. She said the family hasn't cut her off like they did me, but she's still deciding if she wants them there since they're backing our parents. With me, they were downright mean, but with her, they're just defending mom and dad without blaming her outright. I reckon it's because our parents won't say sorry, but they're fine leaning on us kids later, and since my grandparents won't help them anymore, they're keeping things open with Catherine. That's my guess. Anyway, I don't know for sure, but they're treating her way better than me, which stinks, though I'm used to it. At least she's starting to see through them, and if she's serious about changing, I might give her a shot. She said sorry again on the phone for losing it last time and said she'd love for me to be at the wedding so some family's there. I haven't decided if I'll go. I'm taking a few days to think it over. Fixing a 5-year gap ain't easy, but I don't want to be the guy who never moves on. That'd make me miserable. I talked it over with my grandparents, and they said if I go, they'll come too. They weren't sure before, but now, with Catherine rethinking the family, they might show up since she may not ask the others. Update 4, hey there, so yesterday I went to Catherine's wedding, not just as a guest, though. I walked her down the aisle. Our parents never said sorry or even called her before the big day, so they didn't get an invite. She was torn up about it for a couple days leading up to it and asked me if I'd step in and walk with her because she needed someone to lean on. I said yes right away. Whatever's happened before, no one should feel that lousy, especially over a petty fight with their own folks. I always figured they'd ditch me easier since Catherine was their favorite, but seeing them too stubborn and full of themselves to mend things with the kid they adored their whole lives, that's a new low. They're a big reason she turned out so rotten. No one ever told her to knock it off. They should have stepped up as parents, but they didn't care and let her run wild, making her the brat she was. I ain't saying it's all on them, but they could have stopped it and didn't. When she asked me to be there for her, I agreed, and she was real grateful, especially since the few family folks she invited turned her down. Guess they're all siding with mom and dad and loving the drama. I convinced my grandparents to come, though, and she apologized to us all before it started. Her fiancé even said sorry to me for how he acted years back. She'd told him the whole deal with our parents, and he said not to sweat the money, he'd take care of it. That's how they sorted it out. She nearly lost it before the ceremony, missing our folks, but me, her fiancé, and our grandparents told her not to let them spoil her day. Things aren't perfect now, but we're gonna try to make it better moving forward. I want to believe she's different, and yesterday, I really think she meant it about starting over. Some might not like what I did, but I feel good about it.